COVID sucks. Since March 2020, I have been downright unable to find any positions for user experience designers, junior or otherwise. It has just been nearly impossible. As a matter of fact, as I just started recording this, I applied to a position and I got a rejection email. That's efficient. Obviously, I've been getting frustrated, and as time went on, it felt like the clock was ticking louder and louder. After expressing some of my frustrations with fellow professional contacts, I started getting the idea that I should probably start making my own work. I started brainstorming what I might actually want to do, and my mind turned to what Google and Apple were working on, which was that COVID tracing API, which sounded like a pretty cool idea, and I was really hoping to see an app for Minnesota sometime soon. I took a bit of a look around just to see if there was anything that was actually out on the market or being worked on, and I didn't see anything, so I figured I could get started on making a tracing app. I wanted to get an idea of what would make a good tracing app. I spent some time downloading some of the apps that were already on the market, and at the time I started the project, there were only two. Of those two, I found Arizona had the most inspiring app. It was pleasant to set up, and the privacy issues and everything were cleared up right from the get-go when you set up the app. It was cute, informative. I like that. Next, I needed to get some input from people I knew. I sent up a Google form, and I sent it off to anyone who would give me the time of day. Turns out that's about 40 people. After I got my 40 responses, I took a look at what kind of data I'd be working with. Half of my polled respondents were within my age group, but a good number of them were well up into the 55 to 64 age range, which was going to be immensely helpful to me to figuring out if there were any differences in features that were requested based on age group. And while this demographic data was all well and good for creating personas, the most important thing to me was figuring out what kind of features people were looking for, and they are as follows. 82.5% of respondents wanted an interactive map to find COVID testing locations, 70% wanted a readout for current case numbers in the state, and 65% marked notifications as an important feature. I provided an other section for people to respond freely about what other features they might want, and one of the more common ones that came up was people wanted some sort of mapping where they could see like a heat map of where COVID cases were around them. As nice as I thought this idea was, I did some research and I looked at what Google and Apple had set in their API for privacy issues. Location just cannot be used for any of their data when they collect a COVID case and then that's reported to the app. There was no way I was going to do that, and even if it wasn't in their ruling, I think it just isn't quite ethical for someone to put that into the app. It exposes a lot of information, and as nice as it is, I don't think that would get a lot of people on board. On to personas. Personas are not my strong suit. As important as they are to keeping an open mind with the demographic you're working with and understanding your end users, I just struggle with coming up with original John Does for every single age group I have. I'd actually prefer coming up with personas all named John Doe. I think that would be easier for me. Regardless, I managed to come up with some pretty original ideas to work with. Meet Julian and William. Julian was meant to capture the 18 to 24 age group from my survey. He's the more tech-savvy type of person, and he really is attuned to the news behind COVID. William, on the other hand, captures an older demographic who is not quite as explorative when it comes to new software, and likely is just going to set up the app and forget about it, have it run in the background. Which is still good. That's exactly what I want, because the app is only as effective as the amount of people that are using it. So if the setup is clean, then they're more likely to use it. That's why keeping the William persona in mind was important to me, because I know generally what I like and my age group likes, but I have to have a better idea of what an older generation is going to be doing when I create my design. I was a little apprehensive in figuring out the layout for this app. I wanted to prioritize exposure notifications first, because I assumed a lot of users are likely going to just set up the app, never go back into it, and just hope it's running in the background and doing its thing. Once notification setup is complete, the user is then dumped onto their homepage. And this is where I was struggling the most, because I've never really developed anything more complicated than just pages coming in one after the other, just rudimentary slideshow type stuff. I was really worried about how this was going to end up. I kept my user needs in mind, and I made a very easy to understand glanceable dashboard with small little bits of information that shouldn't be too overwhelming for any user. The top of the screen hosts a little banner that indicates what kind of exposure the user would have. It would remain gray and ever present if there's no exposure, just so the user knows that there is some sort of notification that goes on there, and then would turn red under severe exposure that would indicate that they should get checked out. Below that is a little infographic of the current case numbers in Minnesota, and just below that is an iOS share sheet element that would just pop open the standard iOS share sheet so anyone could share with their friends and family. Below that, I placed a small interactive map with nearby testing locations, and then there's a small button for reporting a positive diagnosis. This is one of the first times I've actually sat down and really wireframed an idea I've had, and clearly it's not perfect. I learned a lot about how I present my ideas and how I should annotate things for clarity, but I still have a lot of room to improve. Regardless, I move forward. Prototyping. This is where the fun begins. I'm no stranger to Figma. I've used it before in the past, even for professional work, but I've still got a lot to learn about the program and how to really utilize it to the best I can. On top of it all, my design abilities are still a little rough around the edges. Again, this is going to be another learning experience for me. I started with the setup screens. I knew it would be too hard to set up the user flow for that because I've done things like that in the past. Just had to have each frame set up, a button for each to progress, and I'd be good to go. Where things really started to get complicated, of course, was the home screen. My first attempt was absolute garbage, and I can't believe I didn't see it when I first made it. My significant exposure banner was confusing and didn't stand out as an element you could click on. The color choice I had for my report... Oh, my light turned off. The color choice I had for my reported cases graphic didn't make much sense either. And then the map that I put at the bottom was just so invasive and a huge waste of space, and it was just cluttering up the entire screen. There really wasn't much rhyme or reason to anything on there. It was bad. But knowing it was bad gave me the hope that I could make the changes necessary. Take 2. After getting some feedback, I made some adjustments to my design. First, I reworked the banner at the top of the screen for better visibility. The banner has more of a gradient to it to indicate that it's a clickable element, and just to really solidify it, I put a note at the bottom to indicate that, hey, you've been exposed, click the banner. Though it's still not perfect, I think it could use a few more iterations to really nail things down. I think it conveys urgency, and it's quite a bit more prominent. Next, I made some changes to the case count numbers. I went through a couple iterations of color choices, but I ultimately settled on more of the green that's used by the Minnesota Department of Health. The biggest change I made that I'm kind of proud of all of this, I put a dashed line across the chart and then had the current case count on it, so it gives reference to where other case numbers were for the past 30 days, so you can get a baseline understanding of where you are currently with the case count compared to where it was. There's a sense of scale. I also sectioned this off in a gray box to really give it its own place on the main screen, and I included the report case ID in the same green in that section just to kind of bring all the reported cases things together, and I think that works better. The next and probably obvious big change was I removed the map entirely from the main screen. In its space, I put 3 valuable quick links. The Find Testing Locations link brings the user to a separate screen with my existing map solution. I think this gives better navigational awareness, and it removes a lot of the clutter that I had going on the main screen from my first prototype. The remaining 2 links on the main page just bring the user to their respective pages on the Minnesota Department of Health website. Gets the job done, it's just a prototype. Overall, I think I've gained a better understanding of my design approaches and where I should make changes, primarily in what the user first sees when they're given options. I presented the prototype to a couple of my friends and family, and all seemed to navigate it pretty smoothly without any issue. If I gave myself more time, I'd probably do some more rigorous user testing. What I'd be curious to see with user testing is understanding what will work best for that significant exposure banner and what would give people the incentive to click. Because as it stands right now, I can't seem to figure out what people want to click on. I thought it was made clear. I hope this was insightful and entertaining. I hope you're staying safe and healthy. And I hope we get out of this soon with all the vaccine news we've got going on. And if you're looking for a junior UX designer,